freedom of speech, an issue that affects everyone and all.
Some within your party hope to silence the opposition. I assure you they will give it body and solidarity.
Well, I am a party of one, Thomas.
As you well know. Why blacken your fragile reputation by an assault on the freedoms for which we both fought? Do you intend to ship out the entire French population of the United States? Along with any other luckless soul who happens to voice a contrary opinion?
Well, if that contrary opinion threatens to divide the nation at a time when we must stand united, then yes, I will do just that. I'm entrusted with the nation's safety, Thomas. So these war measures will protect us from insurrection and subversion.
There is no war.
And that is the principle behind these measures. The prevention of war.
Cannot protect the nation by attacking the right of every man to speak freely without fear.
What we just observed was a scene discussed in the main argument behind freedom of speech, an argument that has taken place since the start of our own country with the Alien and Sedition Acts. Between 1798 through 1801, John Adams had put into effect the Alien and Sedition Acts as tensions between the United States and France grew. John Adams proclaimed, as we saw in the reenactment, that freedom of speech can be dangerous to the standing government. Thomas Jefferson, however, felt that our freedom of speech was crucial, and what John Adams was doing was not an act to protect the people, but rather a way to take their rights and their liberty away and strengthen the government.
As time progressed and America grew more powerful militarily, World War I began, and so did the draft. Nearly 2,000 men were accused of being traitors and had violated the Espionage Act. One of the most famous men of these incidences was Charles Skettnick, who was passing out anti-draft pamphlets intending to weaken the military support. Skettnick preached, "Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech." He stood by those words and spoke them true all the way up till his Supreme Court hearing in 1919, when he was announced to have violated the Espionage Act. Holmes spoke for the court after the unanimous decision. The question in every case is whether the words used are used in such a circumstance and are of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has the right to prevent. And once again, as time progressed, so did the military power of our nation. During the start of the Cold War, the Red Scare was overwhelming, and once again, our government wished to play the act of Big Brother and silence those who did not agree with their views. Young leaders of the Communist Party arose, wishing to radically change the structure of our government and openly announce their beliefs to the government, leading to the court case Dennis versus U.S. Congress. Leaders of the conspiracy had violated the Smith Act, an act that proclaimed it to be unlawful to plot the overthrow or destruction of the standing government.
1965. Times were different. The youth brought change.
The conduct of the students essentially was this. At Christmas time in 1965, they decided that they would wear small black armbands to express certain views which they had in regard to the war in Vietnam. Specifically, the views were that they mourned the dead of both sides, both civilian and military, in that war, and they supported the proposal that had been made by United States Senator Robert Kennedy that the truce which had been proposed for that war over the Christmas period be made an open-ended or an indefinite truce. This was the purpose that the students gave for wearing the armbands during this period.
What you just heard was a lawyer from the court case Tinker versus Des Moines, who explained the issues of what happened. In this court case, freedom of speech was able to strive through. The children who protested the government were allowed to express their discontent for the government. People were finally allowed to show their disapproval for our government's actions. 5 to 6 years later, the New York Times actually came up to the Supreme Court involving the Pentagon Papers, papers that had involved top-secret information about the war strategies of our government. we began to see freedom of speech change. People would actually be able to show their evils of their government. The New York Times won their court hearing with a unanimous 6-3 decision.
Wouldn't you go to prison to tell some this war?
Freedom of speech had finally evolved in America to where the government was not the almighty censorship label it once was. However, because of this progression, a new type of debate arose in America. Culturally, the debate affected our society. Ashcroft versus the Freedom of Speech Coalition in 2001 to 2002, a court case that brought up an issue that didn't actually involve the government's power, but rather child pornography. The court case involved young girls who were over 18 yet looked like children that were involved in porn. The argument was these girls could instigate predators and approval of child pornography. The court, however, felt that in a 6-3 decision, the girls had the right to do what they wanted. Now that we've seen the debate in our country, you might be asking yourself, well, how can freedom of speech and expression relate to diplomacy? During 2010, we observed freedom of speech be challenged from various Islamic groups versus American and Western views of freedom of speech. At the start of the year, South Park, a popular show on Comedy Central, released an episode that picked fun at the censorship guidelines not to depict Muhammad. Various Muslim groups were enraged around the world and had issued death threats to American citizens. Later on during the year, September 11th came, and a church leader by the name of Terry Jones felt on the 9th anniversary of the day, Americans should go out and burn Korans. And once again, Muslim groups around the world felt this freedom of expression was too much and wished to silence it. Once again, death threats on American lives were issued and tensions between America and Islamic nations grew. Western countries, in response to Islam, have begun to censor Muslims as well. France all throughout last year pushed laws through forcing followers of Islam to westernize and leave behind Islamic tradition. Freedom of speech. What is the correct stance to take on this issue? Is it to follow what Julian Assange, founder of WikiLeaks, practices and allow complete freedom of speech to take place, or do we follow someone like Osama bin Laden, leader of Al-Qaeda, and censor what needs to be censored? Should people feel free to challenge the set order to express themselves, or should they fall in line and allow censorship to rule?
Words have the power to both destroy and heal. When words are both true and kind, they can change our world.